Hey guys, what's up? This is going to be the ultimate siege guide in Brawl Stars for 2020. Before we start, don't forget to join my brand new clan if you want. Everyone's welcome. Here's the clan tag and name. And also don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't forget that part. Notifications are very important for me if you want to see more guides in the future just like this one. So now let's just get into the strategies of how to completely noodle your opponents in Siege. So Siege can be very consistent to win if you have a solid team that you're playing with and you know a lot about the strategy of the game. And on top of that, games can also finish before the timer runs out, just like Heist or Brawl Ball. So if you finish early, you can save time, and that just lets you push trophies faster in the long run. So it's very important to get good at Siege and use the mode to help you push trophies. Now, even if you don't have a solid team, like you'll see in the gameplay in the background of this video, you can still use these tips. But it works a lot better when you have a team that you can actually communicate with and adapt to, depending on how the match goes. And since everyone is going to basically have completely separate roles on basically all aspects of the game, offense, defense, and collecting bolts, it makes it different than other modes, so it's a lot harder to do with randoms in my opinion. With that being said, let's talk about the control of the game. So control is sort of the main aspect of Siege, and it's what's going to help you sort of win the game. And every bot you get is going to give you guaranteed control of the center of the map, because your opponents obviously have to move back to defend it, so you can use that time to stand in the center and collect bolts and wait for them to take out the bot, or try to be a bit more aggressive. But ultimately, that control of the center gives you more bolts, and once you have more bolts, obviously you get stronger bots, more damage, and just lets you win the game. So even if you don't get any damage, getting that bot is still very useful because you can get control from it. And when you do have control, do make sure to keep opponents out of the center as much as possible and just push them back closer to their Ike turret. So you basically can just keep harassing them and picking up bolts in between that, just so that they won't be able to move forward without dying. And if they ever do try to move forward and try to take back control, just try to punish them as much as possible and make sure that they won't be able to survive if they try to take back control. And once you get this control, since you can pretty much win the next Siege bot from it, you really need to get that first bot in order to take control right at the start of the game and maintain that control as long as possible. So your first goal when a Siege game starts should not be to just try to rush and kill your opponents. You really just want to immediately get the bolts, and you want to get at least 2 bolts and not die with them, because that will guarantee that your opponents can't get the first bot, since at best they can tie you with 2 more bolts, since at max there's going to be 4 bolts that spawn before the first siege. So if you get those 2 bolts, you know you won't be forced out of the center, and then you can work and try to get control. If you got that first siege, great, then you should have that guaranteed control. If not, then once it ties, you can just try to push your opponents out, try to methodically kill them without dying yourself, and then you can get control that way. But to actually get those first couple bolts, some ways you can do that is by using BB. She's extremely helpful for this because she obviously moves super fast after the recent buffs, and her home run star power adds even more speed on top of that. So you can basically guarantee you'll get the first bolt because you're faster than everyone else. And also BB is useful because she helps to push people trying to get near other bolts with her charge bar. So she's a very good choice in Siege. For that reason, she's very good at beating the game and just for maintaining control throughout the game. Also, Tick and Barley and Sprout, those throwers at the beginning of the game, are going to be great because they help have that area denial, and if you do that around the area that the bolts are in, your opponent's team won't really be able to pick them up safely without taking a lot of damage. So it's very good to just throw a bunch of attacks near the bolts right at the start of the game, just so that way your team can get them safely and deny your opponent from that first siege bot. Now let's talk about offense in the game and maintaining control of the center of the map. So once you have the control of the center using the strategies I was just talking about, and you're sort of farming a lot of bolts, you have a bit of an advantage. You can't give up that advantage during a push with the bot. You always want to err on the side of caution when you're pushing with a bot, because dying is literally the worst possible thing that could happen, because once you die, the opposing team immediately has a person advantage and they can take back control before you even get back to the center, and that's horrible for the entire course of the game. So only push forward a bit. For example, if you're a long range brawler and you can support the bot and get extra damage on the Ike turret without a significant risk of dying. And you can also try to target and stall or kill the opponents who are going to be the best at defending your bot, so that way you just buy your bot a lot more time on their turret, and that will be pretty helpful in the long run. But once again, if there's a chance that you'll take a lot of damage from doing that, then just don't do it. It's better just to poke at them a little bit and keep yourself alive than really go in for the kill and risk yourself dying as well. And you want to retreat early enough just so that when the push is about over, you want to make sure you're at full health with most of your attacks charged up, because then what you want to do is basically just spread out and have your whole team stay close to your opponent's Ike turret range and just apply pressure constantly to keep your opponents from entering the center. And it's going to be very, very difficult for them to regain the control, so as long as you don't let up the pressure, you should be able to maintain control fairly well. And if you keep this control of the center for the entire time after a push, you're basically guaranteed to get the next spot as well. So just always make sure to focus on this control of the center. Don't give it up just to chase someone down and potentially die in the process, because when you die, you just lose control. Now, the single exception to these rules about maintaining control is if you think you can win the game on any given push. And if you play a lot of seed games, you'll really know how much damage you can output and when it is a good idea to go and try to push and commit everything to winning the game. But if you plan to rush the turret, do make sure that you do commit to it, because if you back out at the last second, you're probably still going to die and completely lose control, but you'll just also miss a lot of extra shots on the safe in the process. So if there is a failed push and you realize it too late, don't try to save that last 10 health, because you're going to die or lose control anyway. It doesn't matter. Just try to get that extra damage off while you still can and cut your losses. And also, when you're pushing to try to get the win in the game, don't just focus on attacking the Ike turret, because if you're a relatively low damage dealer, you won't be doing too much. So I would focus on killing your opponents who are going to deal a lot of damage to your own bot and potentially reduce your overall damage output. I think that's a more ideal use of your damage when you're not going to be doing much to the Ike turret yourself. And if you're a tank, like especially Rosa, when you have your shield, you can also tank a few shots from the turret by standing in front of your bot, so that way your bot can just save a bit more health and let the push last longer. Now, another way to end the game not during a push is by dive bombing, and you usually do this when there's about 20% or less damage left on your opponent's turret. It depends on how much damage the brawlers on your team can do. And any brawler that has long range or that can just like move forward with a super or gadget can dive bomb the safe. You basically just try to sneak past your opponents, then run into the Ike turret's range until you can hit it, and then just use all your attacks as fast as possible and try to get a bit of extra chip damage to hopefully end the game. But you only do want to do it if you're going to immediately end the game, or if all 3 sieges are done and there's really no other way you can get damage on the safe, but otherwise you're just going to be dying and giving up control for no reason, so only do it in those situations. And obviously, if you're doing this, you really need to know exactly how much damage you can do by yourself with, say, 3 attacks and a super if you're planning on dive bombing the safe. So think about this beforehand coming into the match, or just do a match and try it and see how much percentage you can knock off of the turret. So that way you can be sure that you're going to end the game when you use all these attacks, and not just leave it with an extra 2% and then have your opponent get that control back and win the last siege and then win it all before you can finish off their turret. Now let's talk about the last portion of the game, and that is defense. So you basically need 3 separate roles for each of the 3 brawlers on your team. So you need someone to tank for the bot, and you also have to have someone dealing damage to the bot, and you also have to have someone to push your opponents back and keep them from dealing a lot of damage to your turret. So for the person who is the tank, you want to basically just stand in front of the bot while attacking it to just stall it out, and then you also want to intentionally die as the tank right before the opposing bot is going to enter your Ike turret's range. And when you do that, you're going to respawn with your invincibility shield, and you'll be able to just, once again, just tank for the bot, except you'll be taking no damage because you died at the perfect time, so that way you can just have that invincibility shield. And that's very, very useful strategy. So because it's so good to do this, don't actually let your opponents do this. So if they're trying to have their tank suicide and respawn to get that invincibility to stall your bot on a push, don't try to kill them faster, because that's just going to give them an advantage. So basically you just want to kill them earlier or a lot later, or instead just focus your attacks on the people who aren't going to be tanking the bot instead. And then for the person who is mainly focused on dealing damage to the bot, basically just try to start attacking as soon as possible, just so that way you can shred its HP and get it down as much as possible. And hopefully if you get it down enough before it even enters your range, your opponents won't feel confident enough to even push in with it, and then it'll be a lot easier to get attacks off on it later, because your opponents won't be pressuring you as well. And then for the person who is mainly going to be pushing the opponent back during defense, you really only want to attack opponents who are a threat to your turret with like high damage, like Barley or Brock, because if you can push them back or even kill them, it's going to significantly reduce the amount of damage you take, and just going to make your team last in the game much longer, because you'll be able to withstand even 2 sieges in a row, and then if you just win the 3rd one, you could even win the entire game because of that. And to fulfill this role, you want someone who can act as like a significant threat like Jean or BB, and you really just want to try to pressure them back. And if you do kill them, it's going to make regaining control after the defense so much easier, because that's just one less person you have to worry about. I know I've defined like these 3 specific roles, but they are a bit flexible. Like if you're mainly focusing on dealing damage to the bot, you can also attack someone nearby if you can make that attack really worth it by killing them or just forcing them to retreat. And if everyone just executes their roles properly, you should be able to completely minimize damage on your turret as much as possible. Now that we've talked about the strategy of the mode, I want to go a bit over what the best team comps are. And in the current meta, you really have to run a tank for applying pressure throughout the game and just defending bots, and usually you would choose someone like Rosa, Bull, or Frank for this position. There are other options, but I'm just mentioning a couple here. And then you definitely also want a thrower, because that just gives you insane area denial that you'll really need if you want to collect bolts in the early game and just deal a decent amount of damage in the late game. Someone like Tick, Barley, or Sprout. And then finally, you want to include someone who's sort of a support or high damage brawler that you can use for just getting kills in the center, having good damage all around, and just maintaining that control throughout the game. So someone like BB or Ems or even Jean or Penny are very good choices for this. And then in Factory Rush, the map is quite different than the other Siege maps, so the meta is also a little different. Pam is actually very, very good for this map, and so is Penny, so I recommend running those 2 on Factory Rush, and then just another support or damage brawler would be good. But that's gonna be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and a comment down below if you found this useful, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see more guides like this in the future. But that's all for today, guys, so see you later.